Hello and welcome, I'm Tim and this is TimBatSea. We are currently moving a loaded barge. I should say partially loaded barge. We've come off a ship that took some of the product and now we're being redirected back to an oil facility, and they're going to top up the tanks and we'll probably take it, I imagine, to another ship later on. We're coming by the 8 buoy in the Kilvan Cull. This buoy over here is something that we all use regardless of what the tide tables tell us. We all look at things like this buoy over here. You can see that the tide is clearly flooding on that. And so regardless of what the tide tables say or whatever, this will give us a really good idea of what's happening at this dock. And this dock is right up here on the left-hand side. Now, originally my plan was I have to go starboard side too. So originally my plan was to come around the buoy, head deep into the dock, and do a clockwise turn and keep my wheels to the dock. And as I came around the corner, I saw this big ship over there on the next dock up and said, you know what, if I get in trouble, that ship's going to be a problem. So I kind of, I wanted to err on the side of safety. So I changed that plan, went to plan B, and now I have given myself a little bit of room over here on to the right side of the channel, and I'm slowing down, taking off way. Remember that we still probably have probably pretty close to 2 million gallons of product on this barge right here. So there's a lot of kinetic energy. When we're moving that thing about 8.6 knots, something like that, it takes a lot of time to get it to slow down. Now granted, we are going against the tide, so the tide will help us to slow down. But I'm starting to make my move now, and what I do is if I go all stop with the engines, I can put the rudder hard over, but it really won't do that much at all. We've discussed this in other videos before, but without the pressure on the rudders of the wheel wash, things don't really happen on a vessel this big that much. So yeah, it'll move a little bit, but as you slow down, it moves even less, and yada yada yada. You get the idea. So anyway, right now I'm thinking to myself probably that, this was a while ago, so I'm looking back at it, and I'm thinking to myself, you know what, I really should have gotten closer to the ship. And in hindsight, because the tide was flooding, I could have got right up to the ship and used the tide to, the tide would only pull me down to the dock. But sometimes you get anxious and you want to get the job done, and the guys are out on deck and watch changes coming up or whatever it might be. And so you make it happen. So I'm rotating in, and in doing this I'm doing a left twist. So my rudder is hard over to port, my starboard engine is ahead, my port engine's astern, and you can see some of our wake rolling in over there. That was from us originally when we were going up the kills, and so the wake is catching up with us as we're spinning. Now here's the problem that I'm facing, is that you can still see I still have some energy taking me against the tide. In other words, from left to right of the screen. The bow is moving the other way, but the stern is moving the right way. So that's good. I'm trying to stay as close to the dock as I can, but I want to. If I snap the barge right around, what's going to happen is in doing that, I'll lose too much ground because of the flood tide, so I'll start moving to the left more and more. And so I've probably already talked to the guys on deck and said, look, I want to get as close to the dock as I can, but I'm probably going to have to back up because it's going to be what we call a fair tide landing anyway. So we've all talked about this, and this is fine. Now you can see I'm kind of stalled out here. And so when you get sometimes the tide, when you're trying to work against the tide, especially when the tug right now is in the strongest part of the tide in the middle of the channel, so that the flood tide is working from the starboard side of the tug, pushing it to the left, and I'm trying to get the tug to go to the right. So it's hard, so I'm having to use more and more horsepower doing this. Now, you're going to see something that's going to happen here, or I assume is going to happen here, that this, one of the problems with doing this, and remember, in watching this now, I would have preferred to have been much closer to the ship, so I could have taken care of all this turning long before I got to the dock. And you can see those are what we call the chick stands, or the manifold where we're going to actually pump out where the hose rack is right there. That's where the center of the barge is going to end up, but the back of the barge is going to be right where the bow is right now. And so I'm losing ground all the time. And what happens is, it's not like the stern goes over. The pivot point varies between a third of the way back to right in the center of the barge, and sometimes with a tide like this, it might even be 2/3 of the way back on the barge. So if I might be 20 feet from the bow to the closest point on the dock, when I rotate past this 90 degrees, that 20 feet might open up to 100 feet, because the barge, I said in the last video, I made a mistake. I said the barge was 466 feet. It's 366 feet. I don't know why I said that. Sometimes, I don't know, any of you guys that do a lot of social media, you'll realize that once you start talking on the camera, or on the microphone here, some really stupid stuff comes out of your mouth sometimes. I'm sure that any of us watching politics would agree with that. But anyway, I didn't mean to mislead anybody. This barge, I believe, is 366 feet long. Anyway, and then we're another 100 feet behind it. But anyway, so just because I get the bow up there doesn't mean I can shoot the stern right over. It's pivoting, and in the pivot process, the bow comes out as I bring the stern in. So right now I'm trying to utilize, I'm not trying to utilize, I'm trying to minimize the negative effect of the flood tide. Because the tide is going, from right to left, the water that is hitting the starboard side of the barge right now is pushing the barge off the dock. Had it been an ebb tide, the exact opposite would be happening. The water would be hitting the port side, and it would be driving us toward the dock, and that would be ideal. And I'm sure that somebody's going to say in the comments, why didn't you just go port side too? Oh, believe me, I would have loved to have done that. That would have been wonderful. But every dock has its different procedures, and every tankerman has his different interpretations of what he wants to do. And in this particular dock, because of the way the tide runs, I think they actually have problems with the boom. The boom is you can see this dotted thing over there. Sometimes a yellow and black. This one's, I think, red and black on the right-hand side there. It's a floating thing that extends about 3 feet down in the water with weights, and probably almost a foot high. And they encapsulate the whole barge during the process of loading or unloading. And so in the event that there was ever oil released, oil that fell out off of the barge, it would be contained in the oil boom, and they would be able to suck it out and keep it from contaminating the environment. And I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, I'm trying to get over there all the time, and the tide isn't helping me. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to continue to back into the tide, and I'm watching that predictor line all the time. As soon as the predictor line starts to show me anything that the stern of the barge is coming out, I'll start moving my rudder and trying to get closer and closer over there. Now, if none of this works, I can always just bring the bow out, rotate all the way around, get the stern of the tug into the tide, and then crank the bow out even further, and then have the tide be pushing on the port side of the barge and push it over that way. And that's I don't want to say that's a last case scenario. That's the trump card that you can always hold. So if this went really wrong, we could do that, but it would just involve a little bit more time and a little bit more patience than I had at the moment. So I continue to try to do this and continue to work it over. There's something that I do, and I don't know if ever other people do it in the industry. I'm sure that I'm not alone in this. I just, I don't think I've ever talked to any of the other guys if they do this or whatever. But I've talked about walking, and that's where we try to get the boat to go sideways, or in this case, the tug and the barge to go sideways. And I've said that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to walk a loaded barge this size. And that's because all that we're doing it basically with horsepower all the way in the stern, and you're trying to have the whole thing go sideways. So that's next to impossible to do. But there are situations like right here where I call it leaning. I lean on the barge. And what I'm doing is basically trying to walk, and just so everyone knows what I'm talking about, in order to walk the barge, assuming the barge was light, or assuming I was light tugged and I just wanted to walk the boat over, I would put my rudder to port. I would put my port engine ahead and my starboard engine astern, which would be kind of the opposite of a twist. And what happens is that port engine will push the stern over to the starboard, and the starboard engine, because it doesn't have any backing, it doesn't have any rotational effect because the backing water doesn't hit any of the rudder, pulls on the bow and straightens it out. And if you balance the two out, you can actually walk the tug sideways. Excuse me. Well, that can't be done with this. I mean, I think the barge is drawing like 16 feet or something like that. So what I'm doing, because of the tide, and because if I drive ahead, I would end up on the last dolphin up here, and then I'd have to back all the way down. So what I do is I give up just a few degrees of left wheel, maybe 5 or 10 degrees at most, and then bring it back to 0. But I'm doing that left walk, and it's not really walking, but it's keeping the bow in one place as I'm slowly flattening out. And as you can see, it looks like it's working right now. So that's kind of good. It just takes a little bit of time, and one of those things. And when we do this too, even though everyone knows what we're doing, it's not uncommon for us to get to these places and there won't be a dockman to receive our lines. And there are some docks we can go right up and the guys can throw a line on there and grab a line and everything's easy. But there are many docks that have these massive bollards and they're very far in, and the Yokohamas or the pads that hold us off might be 5 or 6 feet. So it might be a total of 8 or 10 feet. They'd have to throw a very big line and open up an eye more than 3 foot around to get around the bollard. So it's a very difficult thing is what I'm trying to say. So in this situation, I'm out of the traffic. The Kills is very I don't want to say congested, but it's a very utilized waterway here. So all of the traffic going into Port Newark and Port Elizabeth and down the Arthur Kills, Holland Hook, all that sort of stuff, it all runs through here. And so because of that, you have all kinds of traffic coming and going. And when I go to, remember we're about 450 feet altogether before the tug and the barge together. So when I go to spin that thing around, I'm kind of taking up the whole space. So I need to get out, spun around and out of the channel as quickly as possible so I don't get in anybody's way and get tangled up with them. And in doing that, now it gives me time to slowly work this thing over and not have to back up and not have to back down and move over and all that. I'm just slowly leaning on it. And this is really a waiting game, a patience game. And it's a beautiful day where this really hurts. It hurts for me anyway, because if you guys remember, I'm what they call a hawse piper. That means that I did not start my career at a maritime college. I actually started out on deck and worked my way up. I did all my continuing education through different maritime schools, but so because of that, it hurts. It's when I do something like this that takes a while, and it's raining or it's blowing or God forbid it's snowing out there and it's blowing 30. And I know the guys are freezing on deck, and it's taking me 20 minutes to get before they can get a first line out. I mean, it's got to suck worse for them, but it makes me feel terrible too, because I remember what that was like as well. But on a day like this, I don't think anybody minds, so we're taking our time. We're getting over there. It gives the guys on the terminal time to come out. And this particular terminal does something that's kind of cool. You used to see this at a lot more terminals, and I'm sure there are a lot more. If anybody knows about this, please mention it in the comments. But it was very common years ago that you would see many terminals, because of the acreage tank farms and refineries and terminals have, that all the workers ride around on bicycles, and they're not like cheap bikes, they're real nice cruisers. And it was always fun seeing guys ride down the dock in their bicycles. Now when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, you know. It's all relatively flat, and aren't any sparks, and there aren't anything that goes wrong, and I think it's always really cool. So whenever I see these guys riding up the dock on their bicycles, it always makes me smile. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. But you can see we're getting closer and closer. Now what I'm doing right now is I could flatten it out, but these guys are telling me to bring the bow in and land on the second to last pad, and they're going to throw a line. This particular barge, the tankerman said that he had been going back and forth to this terminal and to another place, back and forth over and over and over again for his whole hitch. So he knew exactly where to spot the barge, and he said, Tim, just get me over there, I'll get the line. So I was able to get the bow in there, and they got a line on there, and something odd happened. He got the line, and it was amazing, a great throw. They tied it off, and usually when that happens, you can just drive ahead into the line. But there are, remember, lines are only, you know, if you make a line that will never break, you'll need a crane to move it. If you make a line that's really easy to throw, it won't be strong enough to hold a loaded barge. So you got to find this happy medium. So they have a big line, but I know if I do anything more than just bumping it in and out of clutch on one engine, especially because it's a fair tide too. Remember that the tide is going this way as well, and the tide right now, and I think it might have to do with the hydrodynamics of the dock behind me. The water is coming down and it's grabbing the stern and wanting to pull the stern right off. So I'm trying to work into this line, but I'm terrified that I'm going to walk right through this line. And it sounds silly. You say, well, walk through the line, who cares? And you know, it's the lines, they're pretty expensive to begin with, but that's not really what we care. What we really worry about is the snapback. These you'll see that these lines are blue, and they look like Amstel blue, which is the Dyneema, the really strong stuff that's like, you know, almost Kevlar, that sort of stuff. Actually, I think it's stronger than Kevlar, but anyway, it's not that. It's blue. You can see the blue right at the other lines on deck over here, but it's not that. And the reason why is we don't want Kevlar or Dyneema lines on deck because they don't have any stretch. We actually want a little bit of stretch, and for the reason of being a shock absorber. Remember this barge, I mean, it might be 10,000 tons, and if I get it to move ahead, and then the one line has to take it, it's 10,000 tons going, you know, there's a huge shock load on that. But if it's a stretchy line, it might stretch out and pull some of that energy out and then be all good. And I don't mean it's stretchy, it stretches. The problem with that you get when you have a line that stretches is that you get a snapback scenario, and that's where the line can come back and literally cut a man in half. And so because of that, breaking lines is something that we don't want to do at all. I would like to say it never happens, but it does happen. Sometimes blame can be put on people for not changing out lines that need to be replaced, or there are some companies that don't have as strict adherence to protocol as far as changing out bad lines as other companies do. There are tankermen that might not want to go through the hassle of splicing new lines and that sort of thing. And then there are also operators that are heavily handed, throttle hands, guys that use too much. And then there's guys like I mean, every one of us is guilty of being human, and we can all mess up, and we all make mistakes. Things happen. So because of that, we have to be really careful. So right now I'm being really careful, walking the stern, pushing on the line, but trying to make sure I don't walk through that line and doing it. So that was a long-winded way of getting to saying that, but that's the idea, is that I'm trying to come into that line, trying to hold us there while the tide's trying to pull me off, and waiting for the dockmen to show up, and they'll tie the rest of this barge up. But anyway, that's about all that there is to see, and hopefully you guys have found this interesting. I thank you all so much for watching, and a big shout out to my patrons. Patrons are the people that fund the channel, and hey, you know what? For $2 a month, you can be a patron too and get early access to videos, and ad-free content, and special access, and private videos as well. But the big thing patrons do that I don't really talk enough about is that, if you think that having a YouTube channel is going to make you rich, there are a few people that do that. But that's kind of like saying, oh yeah, if you play basketball on the weekends, you could be an NBA millionaire. Yeah, you know what? There are a lot of people that make YouTube videos, like me included. We don't make hardly any money at all. So the Patreon thing isn't about the money. It's that you guys are tangible proof giving me that somebody finds value in the content I make. So thank you guys so much. Take care, be safe, and as always, I'll see you guys on the one.